The vast council chamber of the Galactic Concord was a marvel of engineering, an immense hall where gravity itself seemed to shift and bend to accommodate the diverse species in attendance. Towering crystalline beings, amorphous blobs that pulsed with shifting colors, reptilian warlords clad in ceremonial armor, and even delicate, ethereal beings who shimmered like living light. Each species had a place in this assembly. At the center of the room, standing on a raised platform, were the human representatives, dressed in their formal diplomatic uniforms, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and restrained amusement. Ambassador Clark, a woman of sharp intellect and even sharper wit, stood at the forefront, flanked by her aides and a few cultural specialists. The tension in the room was palpable as High Speaker Varlath, a towering, translucent being whose crystalline form refracted the light in mesmerizing patterns, addressed the humans with his deep, resonant voice. Humans of Earth, you have displayed intelligence, adaptability, and survival skills worthy of consideration for entrance into the Galactic Concord. However, there remains one significant concern that we, the collective species of this council, do not comprehend. It is an anomaly that defies logic, a behavior that pervades your culture, your communication, and even your responses to danger. We must address it before any decision can be made. Clark raised an eyebrow and glanced at her aides, silently wondering what humanity could have possibly done to raise such confusion. Of course, High Speaker. What is this anomaly? Varlatha's glowing eyes intensified. Laughter. A beat of silence, followed by a nearly imperceptible twitch at the corner of Clark's lips. The humans exchanged quick glances. One of the aides cleared their throat, but no one interrupted. Varlath continued, oblivious to the barely suppressed amusement among the human delegation. We have studied your transmissions. We have analyzed your visual and auditory records. We have observed your behaviors in war, in peace, in diplomacy, and in crisis. And time again, we have found instances where you emit these strange sounds. Laughter, even in moments of danger, of fear, and even in the face of death. We cannot comprehend it. Our best scholars have debated its meaning. Our scientists have examined its physiological effects. Our philosophers have attempted to assign purpose to it. But in all our deliberations, we arrive at one conclusion. Laughter is illogical. Clark took a slow breath, carefully composing herself. This was new. In all the briefings she had attended, in all the preparatory reports she had read about interstellar diplomacy, no one had warned her that humanity's greatest barrier to entry into the Concord would be jokes. She folded her hands behind her back and nodded. I see. And what is your concern regarding laughter? Varlatha's tone became almost grave. It is unpredictable. It occurs in circumstances where no rational being should express amusement. We have observed human soldiers laughing before battle. We have seen your species laugh when facing imminent destruction. Worse still, you laugh at things that do not exist. Abstract concepts. Nonsensical juxtapositions. Fabrications you call jokes. It is behavior that suggests either a complete disregard for reality or a dangerous mental instability. We must determine whether laughter is a flaw in your species, one that would make you a liability in interstellar cooperation. One of Clark's aides coughed loudly, covering what was unmistakably a snort of amusement. Clark shot them a sharp look before returning her gaze to the council. She knew the aliens were serious. To them, this was a genuine existential question, a challenge to the logical order of the universe as they understood it. She had to respond carefully. Laughter, Clark began, her voice steady, is not a weakness, nor is it a sign of instability. It is a fundamental part of who we are as a species. It is a way of processing the world, of finding resilience in the face of hardship. Sometimes, laughter is about joy. Sometimes, it is about relief. And sometimes, yes, it is about defiance. When we laugh in the face of danger, it is not because we do not understand the gravity of the situation. It is because we refuse to be consumed by it. The chamber remained silent. The gathered aliens were clearly unconvinced. A reptilian delegate, scales dark as polished obsidian, clicked its claws against the metal podium before speaking. We have no equivalent to this behavior in our species. When we face danger, we react with precision and logic. When we suffer loss, we grieve with solemnity. How can something as absurd as laughter coexist with rational decision-making? Clark allowed herself a small smile. With all due respect, Representative, that's exactly why it matters. Laughter is not the absence of reason. It is what allows us to endure reason's burden. It is how we remind ourselves that no matter how dire the circumstances, No matter how impossible the odds, we are still alive, still thinking, still here. Varlatha's crystalline form flickered slightly, as though considering her words. And what of these jokes? He pressed. These statements that serve no purpose except to create laughter? We have studied your knock-knock jokes. They appear to be completely devoid of meaning. Clark nearly bit her lip to keep from laughing. Instead, she nodded. Humor comes in many forms. Some jokes rely on absurdity, some on cleverness, some on shared experiences. It's not always about the words themselves. It's about the way they connect people. Shared laughter creates bonds, bridges cultural divides, even defuses tension. A murmur spread through the council. Some of the delegates appeared to be considering her words, while others looked as confused as ever. Varlath exhaled a sound like wind chimes vibrating in the wind. This explanation is unsatisfactory. If laughter is as vital to your species as you claim, we must understand it before we allow you entry into the Concord. We require proof that it is not a liability. Clark's posture remained straight, but inside, she felt the absurdity of the situation pressing down on her. And how do you propose we provide that proof? Varlatha's crystalline eyes gleamed. You will teach us how to laugh. The chamber fell silent once more. Then, despite herself, despite the weight of diplomacy and the solemnity of the moment, Clark couldn't help it. The air in the Galactic Concord chamber had grown heavy with confusion and anticipation. After Ambassador Clark's declaration that laughter was an essential part of humanity's resilience, the Council had unanimously decided that in order to accept humanity into the Alliance, they needed proof. Not through reports or explanations, but through experience. And so, Clark now found herself standing before an assembly of some of the most powerful and intelligent beings in the galaxy, preparing to do what no diplomat had ever attempted: make an entire room of aliens laugh. Varlath, the towering crystalline speaker of the Concord, tilted his luminous head slightly. Ambassador Clark, you may begin your demonstration. Clark took a deep breath. It wasn't every day that you had to explain humor to an audience that lacked even the basic biological functions required for laughter. She glanced at her aides, who were barely holding themselves together. They knew, as she did, that this was absurd. The fate of Earth's diplomatic standing rested on whether
she could successfully teach aliens how to get a joke. All right, she said, clasping her hands together. Let's start with something simple. A joke that many humans learn as children. She took a confident step forward. Knock, knock. The chamber fell into dead silence. Some of the delegates glanced at each other, uncertain if this was some kind of ritual introduction. A being from the minion hesitantly tapped one of its claws against the floor. Who is there? It asked cautiously. Clark fought the urge to grin. Boo, she said. Another pause. A reptilian warlord shifted in its seat. A floating, gelatinous ambassador emitted a faint bubbling noise, perhaps the equivalent of a raised eyebrow. Spoke again. Boo-hoo. Clark's smile widened. Oh, don't cry, it's just a joke. Silence. Utter, complete, suffocating silence. A being from the delegation blinked each of its eyes in succession. I do not understand, it said finally. Clark sighed, already feeling the challenge ahead of her. Okay, let's try another one. Humor often comes from expectation versus reality. It's the contrast that makes it funny. Here's one. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? The council members exchanged glances. Glowing eyes pulsed. We do not know. Because he was outstanding in his field. Clark delivered the punchline with a flourish, pausing for a reaction. Nothing. A soft clicking noise echoed from a delegate in the back, possibly in thought. A being made entirely of iridescent gas rippled slightly. The tapped its claw again. This statement contains no logical contradiction, it said, puzzled. A scarecrow would be expected to stand in a field. Clark sighed, rubbing her forehead. Right. Okay. You're taking it too literally. It's a play on words. The phrase outstanding in his field has two meanings, one literal, one metaphorical. That contrast is what makes it funny. More silence. Then the reptilian delegate finally leaned forward. Your species finds amusement in linguistic ambiguity. Among other things, yes. Shifted again, considering. This is most perplexing. You claim that humor is vital to your survival, yet what you describe appears to be an appreciation for imprecision. The concept of deliberate misunderstanding is baffling. Clark exhaled, piecing slightly. All right, let's forget wordplay for now. Maybe something visual will work better. Humor isn't just about words, it's about timing, about the unexpected. She turned to her aide. Lieutenant, hand me that. The aide did so. Clark then turned back to the audience, holding the aloft. Now if I were to drop this, she let it go and the device clattered to the floor. A few delegates flinched. Van gasped. Clark remained utterly deadpan. See, that's not funny. It's just an object falling. But, she continued, bending to pick it up, if I were to pretend to set it down on the table, miss the surface entirely, and let it fall while I acted like nothing happened, that would be funny. She demonstrated, making an exaggerated show of confidently placing the down, only for it to fall right through the air. This time, a few murmurs spread through the room. Van Delegate even tilted its head, as if it had seen something almost amusing. The humor comes from expectation, Clark explained. You think something is going to happen, and then the opposite occurs. The contrast creates surprise, which creates laughter. Processed this information. So laughter is a reaction to incorrect assumptions. In a way, yes, Clark said. It's an appreciation of the absurd. It helps us cope with the unpredictability of life. It's a reminder that not everything is within our control, and sometimes, that's okay. A moment passed. Then, from the far side of the chamber, a deep, guttural noise rumbled through the air. Clark turned sharply. One of the delegates, a massive, armored being with tusks like polished stone, was making a strange, rhythmic sound. It was laughing. The creature's body shook slightly as it processed the realization. The expectation was broken. It said, its voice still rumbling with amusement. The action was performed with confidence, and yet the outcome was failure. This is amusing. A wave of murmurs rippled through the chamber. The concept was beginning to click. More delegates tilted their heads, considering, murmuring, exchanging puzzled yet intrigued glances. Christine's form pulsed with energy. Fascinating, he mused. Laughter is not merely a reaction. It is an acknowledgement of disorder within a order. It is an appreciation of chaos. Clark smiled, leaning against the podium. Now you're getting it. For the first time since the meeting had begun, the atmosphere shifted. Where once there had been skepticism, now there was curiosity. A reptilian delegate attempted to replicate the deep, guttural sound of laughter, its voice coming out as an awkward growl. Another delegate emitted a bizarre clicking noise, as if experimenting. The gaseous being rippled again, almost shimmering with what could be delight. Clark folded her arms. You wanted proof that laughter is not a weakness, that it's a strength. She gestured around the room. You're looking at it. Laughter is connection. And now, for the first time in history, you're laughing with us. Was silent for a long moment. Then, with a slow nod, he said, perhaps humanity has something to teach the galaxy after all.
The Galactic Concord chamber was quieter than usual, but the atmosphere was thick with expectation. After the previous session, where humanity had introduced the concept of humor, the Council had been left in a state of profound contemplation. Many delegates had spent hours, some even days, trying to replicate laughter or analyze its function. But despite their intellectual understanding, true comprehension still eluded most of them. And so today, Ambassador Clark stood once again at the center of the chamber, facing a crowd of beings who had never found reason to laugh, until now. Varleth, the crystalline speaker, shimmered faintly as he addressed the room. Ambassador Clark, the Council has further deliberated on the nature of humor. While your previous demonstration provided some level of insight, many of us remain uncertain of its value. As such, we have decided to conduct a deeper examination. We ask that you, he hesitated slightly, as though the next words were difficult to process, make us laugh again. Clark bit back a grin. It was surreal to see some of the most powerful minds in the galaxy struggling with something so fundamental to humans.
All right, she said, clasping her hands together. Last time, we discussed wordplay and physical comedy. Today, I want to introduce you to another essential part of humor: shared experience. Some of the best jokes come from moments we all recognize, things we've all lived through. Relatable humor is a powerful tool because it connects us. A reptilian delegate from the Tarkash Empire narrowed its yellow eyes. You imply that humor is derived from suffering? Clark shrugged. Sometimes, but not always. Humor often comes from the little struggles of life, things that frustrate us, confuse us, or surprise us. For example, every human has experienced this. You walk into a room and immediately forget why you went in there. The delegate stared at her, unblinking. The gelatinous ambassador from the Ziffler Collective wobbled slightly. This is humorous? Yes, Clark said, nodding. Because it happens to everyone. It's one of those little universal frustrations. And when we joke about it, we're acknowledging how ridiculous it is. The humor comes from recognizing that we're not alone in our confusion. A murmur spread through the chamber. Some delegates exchanged glances. Others tapped at their data pads, presumably logging the information for further analysis. Varleth considered this for a long moment. So humor is not merely a reaction to broken expectations, he mused, but also a means of fostering connection through shared flaws. Exactly, Clark said. Here's another example. Have you ever tried to sleep, but your mind suddenly reminds you of every embarrassing thing you've ever done in your life? Silence. Then, unexpectedly, a low rumbling sound echoed through the chamber. The massive, armored being from the Volthar Dominion shifted in its seat. I have experienced this, it admitted, its deep voice vibrating against the walls. The memories of past failures, returning when one least expects it. Clark snapped her fingers. That's it. That's exactly what I mean. Now, imagine if you told someone else about that experience, and they said, "Oh my God, that happens to me all the time." Suddenly, you feel a little less alone in it. And when you laugh about it, it stops being a burden and just becomes part of life. The Volthar delegate tilted its head, as if processing a revelation. The Ziffler ambassador let out a soft, burbling noise, almost as if it were mimicking laughter. The Tarkash representative, who had been skeptical moments ago, let out a deep hiss. Fascinating, it said. Your species has developed a method to reframe discomfort into something communal, a means of transforming pain into bonding. Humans do this all the time, Clark continued. We joke about bad weather, annoying coworkers, ridiculous bureaucracy. We find humor in everyday frustrations because it helps us cope. Varleth's crystalline form pulsed faintly. Then tell us, Ambassador Clark, what is the most universal human experience of them all? What, above all else, is something your species finds humorous? Clark inhaled. This was it, the moment of truth. She knew exactly what to say. She stepped forward, looked the most powerful beings in the galaxy in the eyes, and delivered the greatest truth humanity had ever known. Accidentally waving back at someone who wasn't waving at you. For a long moment, the chamber was still. And then it happened. A deep, echoing, reverberating sound erupted from the Volthar delegate, followed by a metallic chittering from the Tarkash representative. The Ziffler ambassador's entire gelatinous body shook violently. From the back of the chamber, another delegate let out a strange, rhythmic clicking sound, followed by another. And another. It was laughter. True, genuine laughter. Clark watched as one by one, the delegates succumbed to the absurdity of the concept. Varleth, ever composed, pulsed rapidly as he processed what had just occurred. This is a universal experience? He asked, almost in disbelief. Clark grinned. Oh yeah, and the worst part? Sometimes you wave twice because you think they waved again. The Volthar delegate slammed its massive fist against the table, letting out a booming laugh. The Ziffler ambassador rippled so violently it nearly lost its form. The Tarkash representative's tail twitched with amusement. Even Varleth, ever dignified, emitted a single, sharp pulse of crystalline sound, a sound that Clark could only assume was laughter. The chamber was filled with the impossible, an entire council of aliens, laughing together. Clark folded her arms and let them have their moment. They had finally understood. And more than that, they had felt it. Varleth turned to her, his crystalline body still faintly glowing. Ambassador Clark, he said slowly, with something almost like admiration, I believe we finally understand.
The chamber of the Galactic Concord was different now. Where once the air had been thick with formality and rigid decorum, there was now something else, an undercurrent of familiarity, of camaraderie. The representatives of dozens of species sat in their designated seats, but for the first time in the history of the Council, some of them were leaning toward each other, murmuring in low tones. Some exchanged amused glances, others adjusted their posture in a way that suggested they were more at ease. And at the center of it all, Ambassador Clark stood, arms crossed, watching the change unfold. Varleth, the crystalline speaker of the Council, pulsed gently with shifting colors. "Ambassador Clark," he began, his tone measured but unmistakably lighter than before, "the Council has convened once more to discuss the ramifications of your last session." He hesitated for a brief moment, then added, "and to address certain consequences." Clark arched an eyebrow. "Consequences?" A deep, resonating voice rumbled through the chamber as the Volthar delegate, the massive, armored being who had been among the first to laugh, leaned forward. "My people," he said, his voice like rolling thunder, "have discovered that humor is deeply disruptive." Clark blinked. "Disruptive?" The Volthar delegate nodded solemnly. "Our warriors now gather before battle and exchange what you call jokes. It has spread rapidly. Entire formations have been caught in states of unshakable mirth. Training exercises have been interrupted by sudden fits of laughter. It is unprecedented." Clark stifled a chuckle. "I see. And is this a bad thing?" The Volthar tilted his head in contemplation. "Perhaps not," he admitted. "Morale has improved. Fear has lessened. Still, it is an adjustment." From the other side of the chamber, the Ziffler ambassador, a semi-transparent, gelatinous being, rippled. "My kind have attempted to integrate humor into our diplomatic exchanges," it said, its voice soft and liquid-like. "However, we are experiencing difficulties with the concept of sarcasm. Some of our most critical negotiations have nearly collapsed due to perceived insults." Clark winced. "Yeah, sarcasm is an advanced-level thing. Takes practice." A sharp, metallic chittering sound came from the Tarkash representative, a sleek, reptilian figure with golden eyes. "The engineers of the Tarkash Empire," it said, its tongue flickering slightly, "have developed entire algorithms to decipher humor. We are attempting to quantify it. The results are inconsistent." Clark let out a short laugh. "Yeah, humor doesn't really work like math. It's about timing, delivery, emotion. Sometimes it's not even about the words, it's about how you say them." Varleth hummed thoughtfully. "Then humor, like diplomacy, is an art rather than a science." "Exactly," Clark said. "It's why no two jokes are ever exactly the same, and why humor keeps evolving." She let her gaze sweep across the chamber. "I see what's happening here. Some of you are struggling with it. Some of you are trying to control it. And some of you are realizing that it's already taken hold, and you can't stop it. That's the thing about humor. It spreads. It's infectious, in a good way." The chamber was silent for a long moment, the delegates absorbing her words. Then, a low, familiar rumble of amusement came from the Volthar delegate. "In that case," he said, "humanity has introduced something truly dangerous to the galaxy." Clark smirked. "Oh, absolutely. Humor is dangerous. It challenges authority. It questions reality. It exposes the ridiculousness of rules and power. A well-placed joke can undermine a tyrant more effectively than any weapon. That's why so many oppressive regimes try to ban humor, because they know it's a force they can't control." Varletha's crystalline body pulsed. "Then, by allowing humor into this council, we have allowed a fundamental shift in our dynamics." "Yep," Clark said. "And there's no going back now." The chamber was silent again, but this time it wasn't out of confusion or hesitation. It was the weight of realization settling over them all. The Galactic Concord had stood for centuries, bound by traditions, by rigid laws, by an unwavering sense of order. But today, that order had changed, not by war, not by revolution, but by something as simple and profound as laughter. Finally, Varleth inclined his head, his crystalline form shifting in soft, rhythmic pulses. "It seems," he said, "that we have much to learn, and much to enjoy." A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. The Volthar delegate let out another deep chuckle. The Ziffler ambassador trembled slightly, as if suppressing laughter. Even the Tarkash representative allowed the corners of its mouth to curl into something that might have been a smile. Clark grinned. "Welcome to the new era, everyone. It's going to be a lot more fun from here on out." As the session adjourned, the delegates of the Galactic Concord didn't leave with the usual sense of solemnity. They lingered, some exchanging quiet jokes, others attempting hesitant smiles. Varleth watched it all with something that could only be described as fascination. And as Ambassador Clark walked out of the chamber, she heard something truly remarkable, something she had never thought she'd hear in a place like this.